Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Explorer. Tonight we drift southward, far south, to a land where two oceans meet beneath a sky so wide it could cradle your dreams. This is South Africa, a place where gold sleeps beneath ancient stone, where elephants roam sunburned plains, and where the people hum with languages as colourful as the beadwork on a Xhosa cloak. But don't worry, you won't need a passport for this journey. Just your ears, a comfortable pillow, and maybe a warm drink in hand. As always, this video is designed to help you unwind, to settle gently into a space between curiosity and calm. So I will be speaking slowly, softly, like an evening breeze through a coastal vineyard. And while I've done my best not to make this too interesting, just in case you're hoping to fall asleep, if you do end up wide awake, marvelling at cave paintings or mentally tasting Malva pudding, well, at least you'll be learning something lovely. Before we begin, may I ask a small favour? If this gentle expedition helps you relax, I'd be so grateful if you tapped the like button. Maybe even subscribed to join us for future wanderings. And I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight? What time is it by your clock as we begin our slow stroll through South Africa's story? Feel free to let me know in the comments. It's always heartwarming to see the Sleepy Explorer community stretching across continents and time zones. Now take a deep breath, let your shoulders drop, and as we meander through mountain passes, citrus groves, and songs of resilience, remember, this is your time to simply listen and let go. And just so you know, everything in this video is for relaxation and education only. It is not intended as medical advice of any kind. Let's begin. At the very bottom of the vast African continent, hugged by two oceans and lit by a sun that always seems to shine with just a touch of drama, you'll find South Africa. It's a land that wears its name like a geographic clue, clear, direct, and yet wildly insufficient. Because what lies within that simple name is a country bursting with contrasts, textures, and a kind of soulful complexity that resists being wrapped up neatly. To begin understanding South Africa, it helps to picture it on a map. Look down toward the southernmost tip of Africa, where the land gently tapers to a point between the Atlantic Ocean to the west and the Indian Ocean to the east. That junction of salt and swell is more than just scenic, it's symbolic. Here, currents converge, weather patterns dance, and cultures collide. It's the meeting place, not just of waters, but of histories, people, and worlds. The country shares land borders with 6 others. Namibia to the northwest, Botswana just above that, Zimbabwe further northeast, and Mozambique to the east. It wraps protectively around the tiny kingdom of Eswatini, like a neighbour holding a secret. And then, nestled entirely within its borders, is the mountain-ringed enclave of Lesotho, an independent country perched high in the clouds. Now, if your mental image of Africa leans heavily on endless desert and scorching heat, South Africa might surprise you. This is a land of variety, from the arid stretches of the Kalahari in the northwest to the lush subtropical coasts or along KwaZulu-Natal. South Africa is a patchwork of biomes stitched together by nature's own hand. There are deserts and dry savannahs, yes, but also alpine highlands, green vineyards, misty mountains, and even snowy peaks in winter. Yes, snow in Africa. Along the southern coast, you might walk through Fynbos, one of the most biodiverse floral kingdoms on the planet, where hardy shrubs and bright proteas bloom in stubborn beauty. Inland, you'll find a high veld, a grassy plateau glowing gold in the afternoon light. To the northeast, the low veld offers fertile valleys and wildlife-rich bush. And up north in Limpopo, citrus groves stretch toward the horizon, perfuming the warm air with the scent of sun-ripened fruit. Climate-wise, it's a choose-your-own adventure. Cape Town might greet you with cool, misty mornings and a brisk ocean breeze, while Durban offers balmy humidity and warm Indian Ocean waves. In the Karoo, an ancient semi-desert, the skies are so wide and clear they feel almost supernatural. It's as if the stars come down a little closer at night just to say hello. Now, let's talk first impressions. South Africa is a country of many faces, and it likes to show them all at once. At first glance, things might seem straightforward, until you realise the country has not one, not two, but 3 capitals. Pretoria, the administrative capital, handles most of the government work. Cape Town, with its dramatic mountain backdrop, is home to the Parliament and serves as the legislative capital. And Bloemfontein, tucked in the heart of the interior, plays host to judiciary. It's an unusual setup, but somehow it works. Like a 3-legged stool that's been standing just fine for decades. Then there are the languages. South Africa has 11 official ones, and they are spoken, sung, and switched between with dazzling fluidity. From isiZulu and isiXhosa to Sesotho, Setswana, Afrikaans, and English. Each language is more than words. It's identity, rhythm, heritage. In some neighbourhoods, you'll hear 2 or 3 languages spoken in a single conversation, with none of the speakers missing a beat. There's a musicality to it, a kind of linguistic ballet that makes you realise how flexible the human brain can be when it grows up surrounded by such richness. And that richness isn't just in the tongue spoken, it's in the textures of daily life. Imagine biting into a still warm piece of vetkoek, deep-fried dough filled with savoury mince, while watching penguins waddle along Boulders Beach near Cape Town. Or driving through Mpumalanga at dawn, the air still cool, the hills soft with early mist, and hearing a gospel choir warming up in a roadside chapel. Or standing on a windswept bluff in the Drakensberg, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction, while a thunderstorm growls distantly in the hills. South Africa does something few countries can. It overwhelms and soothes at the same time. One moment you're navigating the lively chaos of a taxi rank in Johannesburg, where minibus drivers honk and shout in a symphony of urgency. The next, you're watching whales breach in the calm waters of Hermanus, your heart beating slower with every splash. There's an emotional elasticity required to be here, a willingness to shift gears quickly, to notice beauty in both the loud and the quiet. And make no mistake, there is loud. South Africa is a country that loves noise. It's in the music, the laughter, the political debates on corner stoops, the street vendors calling out lunch specials, the vuvuzelas still echoing faintly from the soccer stadiums. But there's gentleness too. It's in the way someone might greet you with a warm, "How's it?" and genuinely want to know how your day is going. It's in the unspoken language of shared eye rolls during load shedding, when the power goes out and candles come alive. Then there are the colours. South Africa is a visual feast. The deep red of the earth in Limpopo, the impossibly blue waters of the Garden Route, the lime-green grasslands of KwaZulu-Natal, the geometric beadwork sold by roadside artisans, the vibrant fabrics worn during traditional ceremonies. Even the houses, painted bright pinks, yellows and greens in places like Bo-Kaap, seem to reflect an inner joy bursting outward. But perhaps what stands out most of all is the people. South Africans are among the most resilient, warm, and self-aware individuals you'll ever meet. There's a certain candour in the way they speak, a depth shaped by history but softened with humour. Even the darkest subjects are often met with a joke, a shrug, or a knowing glance. Not because they don't matter, but because laughter, here, is one of the strongest forms of survival. You'll also find a fierce pride woven into daily interactions. Pride in being from Limpopo or the Eastern Cape. Pride in having mastered 3 or 4 languages. Pride in the local rugby team, even if they haven't won in a while. Pride in traditions, in food, in the stories passed down across dinner tables and firelight gatherings. And pride in being part of what is often affectionately called the Rainbow Nation, a term coined to reflect the post-apartheid dream of unity and diversity. Still, South Africa doesn't pretend to be a paradise. It wears its contradictions openly. Wealth and poverty often sit side by side. Cities sparkle with innovation, yet rural areas may still lack basic infrastructure. It's a place where smartphones and ancestral rituals coexist, where glass skyscrapers rise above settlements made of corrugated metal. But somehow, the tension between these worlds becomes part of the larger story, one of contrast, of grit, of ongoing transformation. There's something deeply grounding about South Africa's landscapes too. The country feels old, not just in geological time, but in spirit. The rocks of the Barberton Greenstone Belt are over 3 billion years old. The fossils in the cradle of humankind have whispered their secrets from the depths of ancient caves. And the land itself seems to hold memory, a quiet remembering of the feet that have walked its soil, from ancient herders to gold rush dreamers, to today's barefoot children chasing soccer balls on dusty roads. In many ways, arriving in South Africa, physically or even just through story, is like walking into a home that has seen generations come and go, each leaving behind a mark. There are the creaking floorboards of history, the clutter of cultures living side by side, and the warm scent of something familiar cooking on the stove. You might not understand everything immediately, but stay long enough, listen closely, and something begins to settle in your chest. Not everything here fits into tidy definitions. Mountains and oceans blend with myths and realities. Cities vibrate with chaos and creativity. Languages twist and turn mid-sentence. And through it all, there is rhythm. In the voices, the landscapes, the footsteps, the stories. It's a rhythm that doesn't ask to be understood right away. It just asks to be heard. If the earth were to keep a baby book, South Africa would be right there on the first page, smudged fingerprints and all. Long before there were cities, kingdoms, or even humans as we know them, this corner of the world held the first whispers of something extraordinary. Us. Just northwest of Johannesburg lies the cradle of humankind, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where fossils of our earliest ancestors have been resting for millions of years, like old family photographs buried in limestone drawers. In the caves of Sterkfontein and Swartkrans, scientists have uncovered hominid remains going back more than 3 million years. Names like Australopithecus africanus and Homo naledi may not roll off the tongue at bedtime, but they represent crucial chapters in the story of how humans came to be. South Africa isn't just part of history, it's part of prehistory. The ground beneath your feet here remembers walking upright before the idea even had a name. Much later, around 200,000 years ago, fully modern humans began to appear. And with them came language, tools, culture, and those first precious sparks of community. The early peoples of this region, particularly the San and Khoikhoi, often grouped as Khoisan, were hunter-gatherers and pastoralists with intimate knowledge of the land. They read the stars, followed animal migrations, and left behind rock art that still speaks across the millennia. In places like the Cederberg Mountains, the ochre-coloured paintings depict eland antelope, spiritual dances, and shimmering figures caught mid-motion. These weren't just drawings, they were stories, prayers, memories captured in pigment and stone. The Khoisan languages, some of which are still spoken today, are famous for their unique click consonants, a sound unlike any other in the world, musical and percussive, like nature's own form of punctuation. Though their way of life has changed, echoes of Khoisan traditions live on in art, in medicine, in folklore, and in the very bones of South African culture. Around 2,000 years ago, waves of Bantu-speaking peoples began migrating into southern Africa from the north and east. These communities brought with them agriculture, ironworking, and livestock herding. Unlike the hunter-gatherers, they settled in villages, cultivated crops, and developed structured societies. Over time, they built not only farms, but entire kingdoms. One of the earliest of these was Mapungubwe, near the present-day border with Zimbabwe. Flourishing from the 11th to the 13th century, Mapungubwe was South Africa's first known kingdom, a sophisticated trading hub with links as far as China and the Middle East. Archaeologists have unearthed golden jewellery, imported glass beads, and intricately designed pottery here. The discovery of the famous gold rhinoceros, now housed in Pretoria, speaks of a society with artisanship, hierarchy, and global connections long before European ships ever appeared on the horizon. And then there's Great Zimbabwe, not actually in South Africa, but deeply connected through trade and influence. Its massive stone enclosures and towering walls were built without mortar, standing as a testament to architectural ingenuity and regional power. The Bantu-speaking kingdoms, Mapungubwe, Great Zimbabwe, and others, formed a web of influence, culture, and commerce that spanned thousands of kilometres. But in the 15th and 16th centuries, the world began to shift. European explorers, hungry for spice and gold, began rounding Africa's southern coast. The Portuguese came first, leaving behind a few weather-beaten crosses and tales of storms at sea. Then, in 1652, the Dutch East India Company established a refreshment station at the Cape of Good Hope. What began as a vegetable garden for passing sailors soon became something far more permanent. Under the leadership of Jan van Riebeek, the Dutch settlement grew steadily, pulling in more colonists, slaves and labourers. The Dutch brought with them a rigid Calvinist worldview and a penchant for bureaucracy, both of which would leave deep imprints on the country's development. They clashed with the local Khoikhoi over land and cattle, and gradually pushed inland. Over time, the settlers, known as Boers or Afrikaners, developed their own language, Afrikaans, a daughter of Dutch, and identity. In the early 19th century, Britain took control of the Cape Colony, setting off a series of power struggles and cultural shifts. English became the new language of administration. British settlers arrived by the shipload. Slavery was abolished, the Afrikaners feeling displaced and disillusioned, embarked on the Great Trek, an inland migration of covered wagons, oxen and dusty dreams. They founded new republics like the Orange Free State and the Transvaal, establishing a rural, fiercely independent culture shaped by hardship and isolation. As settlers clashed with indigenous groups like the Xhosa and Zulu, wars erupted. These weren't small skirmishes. They were complex, multi-decade conflicts fueled by land, resources and identity. The Zulu, under kings like Shaka, built a powerful military state that briefly held back the tide of colonial expansion. Shaka's reforms transformed the Zulu army into a formidable force, and his influence still looms large in South African memory. Then, in the late 1800s, the earth glittered, literally. Gold was discovered in the Witwatersrand, near modern-day Johannesburg. Diamonds had already been found in Kimberley a few decades earlier, but gold was the game-changer. South Africa suddenly became a magnet for fortune-seekers, speculators, and industrialists. Shanty towns sprang up overnight, and mining companies consolidated wealth and power at staggering speeds. Johannesburg, fondly called Jozi, or Egoli, the city of gold, rose from the dust like a modern El Dorado. But the riches came at a terrible cost. Africans were forced into labour through laws and taxes. Workers lived in cramped hostels and faced brutal conditions underground. The racial hierarchies already in place hardened further, as wealth concentrated in white hands and segregation began to take legal shape. The British and the Boers eventually clashed in the South African War from 1899 to 1902. Though the British won, it was a bitter, bloody conflict that left deep scars. The war introduced scorched earth tactics and even the use of concentration camps, mostly for Boer civilians, many of whom perished from disease and neglect. After the war, South Africa was united under British control, but the tensions between English and Afrikaans speakers remained. In 1910, the Union of South Africa was born, technically independent, but still tethered to the British Crown. And in the years that followed, laws increasingly codified racial separation. The Natives Land Act of 1913 stripped black South Africans of land ownership rights in most of the country. Political representation was restricted. Economies were divided by race. Then, in 1948, came the official start of apartheid. The National Party, representing white Afrikaner interests, rose to power and implemented a system of racial segregation so extensive it touched every part of life. Where you lived, where you worked, whom you could marry, which bus you could take, all dictated by the colour of your skin. It was not just segregation, it was state-engineered inequality. Resistance began immediately, but not always visibly. The African National Congress, founded decades earlier, ramped up its efforts. Figures like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and of course Nelson Mandela began organising, protesting, and demanding justice. The 1960 Sharpeville massacre, where police opened fire on peaceful demonstrators, shocked the world. In response, Mandela co-founded the ANC's armed wing and was later arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment. For 27 years, Mandela remained behind bars, mostly on Robben Island, off the coast of Cape Town, while the country boiled. But protest continued, both within and outside South Africa. School children rose up in the 1976 Soweto uprising. Musicians, writers, and actors used their art to speak truth. International sanctions, boycotts, and pressure mounted. By the late 1980s, the system was beginning to crack. The cost of enforcing apartheid, both morally and financially, became unsustainable. In 1990, Nelson Mandela was released from prison. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections, and Mandela was elected president. The long walk to freedom, as he famously called it, had reached a turning point. But freedom did not mean forgetting. The country launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, to uncover the atrocities of the past and allow healing through testimony. The process was painful, imperfect, and deeply emotional, but it was an attempt to face the truth without vengeance. Since then, South Africa has continued to wrestle with its past while dreaming of a better future. The scars of apartheid remain, visible in economic disparity, education gaps, and social divisions. But there is also remarkable resilience. Communities continue to rebuild, to innovate, and to hold on to hope with stubborn dignity. The birth of the Rainbow Nation wasn't a magic spell. It didn't fix everything overnight, but it did offer a different lens, one that sees strength in diversity and possibility in shared humanity. It was a moment in which a country chose not to be defined solely by its pain, but also by its potential. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what makes South Africa's timeline so extraordinary. It's not just a history of events, it's a story of survival, reinvention, and the endless complicated pursuit of justice wrapped in the colours of a hopeful flag. If South Africa were a song, its people would be the beat. Not a predictable metronome, mind you, but a complex layered rhythm, like a jazz ensemble playing across time signatures, with ancient instruments and modern flair all at once. It's not always smooth, but it's always alive. One of the most remarkable features of South Africa is its sheer diversity of people. The country is often celebrated as the Rainbow Nation, and while that phrase can sound a bit too polished for a land as raw and real as this one, it does hint at something essential. South Africa is home to more than 60 million people from a wide range of ethnic, cultural and linguistic backgrounds. These aren't just communities living side by side, they're communities woven into each other, sometimes neatly, sometimes messily, but always vibrantly. Let's start with the Zulu, South Africa's largest ethnic group. Primarily based in KwaZulu-Natal, the Zulu people are known for their powerful history, rich oral traditions, and unmistakable sense of identity. The word Zulu means heaven or sky, and there is something grand about their legacy. From King Shaka's warrior innovations to the deeply spiritual rituals still practiced today. The Zulu language, isiZulu, is melodic and expressive, full of rhythm and emotion. It's often used in song and praise poetry, as well as in day-to-day conversations that bounce between tradition and modernity. Then there's the Xhosa people, most commonly found in the Eastern Cape. You'll recognise isiXhosa by its distinctive clicks, those percussive sounds that give the language its musical texture. Nelson Mandela himself was Xhosa, and the culture places a strong emphasis on rites of passage, storytelling, and clan identity. A Xhosa speaker might introduce themselves by naming their clan first, acknowledging a line of ancestors that stretches back generations. Family and lineage matter here, not just as personal heritage, but as a moral compass. Moving inland, we find the Sotho and Tswana peoples, whose languages, Sesotho and Setswana, are part of the broader Bantu family. These communities are centred in the Free State and Northwest provinces, with cultural footprints extending into Lesotho and Botswana. Their traditions include communal farming, intricate beadwork, and initiation schools that guide boys into adulthood through a blend of physical endurance, teaching, and mentorship. Respect for elders is deeply ingrained, and storytelling remains a powerful means of passing wisdom across generations. And then, of course, there's Afrikaans culture, shaped by Dutch, German, French, and indigenous influences. Afrikaans speakers come from a variety of backgrounds, including white Afrikaners and the Cape-coloured community, a diverse group with ancestry that may include Khoisan, slave, and European roots. The Afrikaans language is one of South Africa's most widely spoken and has evolved into a rich tapestry of idioms, humour, and poetry. It's a language that can sound stern or tender, depending on how it's used, and in South Africa, it's used for everything from court rulings to country music. In the coastal city of Durban, you'll meet South Africans of Indian descent, many of whom trace their roots to indentured labourers brought over in the 1800s to work on sugar plantations. Over time, this community blossomed into one of the largest populations of Indian origin outside India itself. Today, their presence is felt in the spice markets of Durban, in temples and mosques, and in the fragrant air of a neighbourhood where biryani, bunny chow, and Bollywood music are part of daily life. Beyond these broad categories are countless more. There are Venda, Ndebele, and Songa communities, each with their own languages, symbols, and cultural markers. There are South Africans of British descent, Jewish families with long histories in the cities, Chinese South Africans whose ancestry dates back to early trade routes, and a growing number of immigrants and refugees from across the continent. It's not just a mixing pot, it's a mosaic. And like any mosaic, some pieces are chipped, others brilliantly polished, but all are part of the larger picture. Now imagine living in a country with 11 official languages, not just recognised, but constitutionally celebrated. It's one of the few places in the world where an official government document might list a paragraph in isiZulu, Sesotho, and Afrikaans, all on the same page. Multilingualism here isn't just a party trick, it's a survival skill, a bridge builder, and a form of resistance against historical erasure. You might hear someone order lunch in English, answer their phone in Setswana, greet a friend in isiXhosa, and shout a joke across the street in Afrikaans, all before their coffee goes cold. In many homes, children grow up fluent in 3 or more languages without even thinking about it. Code switching is second nature. Language is identity, and in South Africa, identity wears many outfits. But beyond the tongues spoken and the names carried, there's something even more quietly profound holding people together. The philosophy of Ubuntu. It's a word found in many Bantu languages, and while no direct English translation captures it perfectly, it's often explained as "I am because we are." It's the idea that a person's humanity is deeply intertwined with the humanity of others. Ubuntu is present in big moments, like national healing after apartheid, but also in small ones, in how neighbours check in on each other after a storm, in how funerals are attended not just by close family, but by entire communities, in how people offer a seat on the minibus taxi to an elder, or share their last bit of airtime with a friend who's run out. It's a cultural undercurrent that reminds everyone no one stands alone. This sense of communal connection extends into how South Africans celebrate and mourn. Family gatherings are events, often lasting an entire weekend, complete with food, storytelling, and multi-generational laughter. Birthdays, weddings, and homecomings are lively, music-filled affairs with more guests than you expected and twice as much food. And funerals, perhaps surprisingly to outsiders, are not sombre, hushed occasions, but vibrant commemorations of a life lived. People wear bright clothing, sing, dance, and send off the departed with celebration and reverence. Hospitality is not optional. It's a duty, a joy, and a reflection of one's character. If you visit a home, you're offered tea. If you stay a little longer, you're fed. If you come back again, you're family. It's a culture where generosity is expected, and where making someone feel welcome is one of the highest social currencies. Yet like any society, South Africa isn't homogeneous. There are regional quirks that create charming, sometimes hilarious contrasts. In Johannesburg, South Africa's economic heart, life moves quickly. The city pulses with energy, ambition, and traffic. People talk fast, walk faster, and always seem to be closing a deal. It's the kind of place where wearing sunglasses indoors isn't just accepted, it might be expected. In contrast, Cape Town, perched by the sea and wrapped around Table Mountain, often takes a more laid-back approach. Meetings begin later, conversations last longer, and a scenic drive might suddenly become a valid excuse for being late. There's a joke that if you ask someone in Cape Town for directions, they'll take you there, give you a historical tour, introduce you to their cousin, and invite you for dinner. Just don't expect it to happen on schedule. And in the rural villages, time takes on a different texture altogether. Days are shaped by natural rhythms. Sunrise, meal prep, farming, and evening fires. Elders sit beneath trees and share wisdom, while children chase chickens and kick worn soccer balls down dusty paths. Life is slower, but not simpler. It's rich in its own way, full of connection and meaning that doesn't require a calendar reminder. All of this, every language, every tradition, every Sunday lunch that turns into a choir practice, is part of the heartbeat of South Africa. A heartbeat that speeds up and slows down, that stutters and surges, but never stops. It beats in the cities and the countryside, in boardrooms and schoolyards, in prayers and protests and poetry. It's the heartbeat of resilience, of pride, of laughter loud enough to echo down generations. It's what keeps the country moving forwards, even when the path is steep and rocky. And in its rhythm, you can hear something rare and powerful. The sound of people wildly different, deeply connected, and unmistakably alive. In South Africa, spirituality is not tucked away in corners or whispered softly from behind closed doors. It lives out loud. It hums in the street music, flows through the dance of everyday life, and rises in the scent of burning herbs or the swell of gospel choirs on Sunday mornings. This is a land where belief is not confined to buildings or rituals. It's a constant companion, woven into the fabric of thought, memory, and motion. Faith in South Africa takes many forms, and often more than one at a time. It's common to meet someone who goes to church on Sunday, consult a sangoma on Monday, and still keeps a small ancestral offering tucked discreetly in a corner of the home. The spiritual landscape here is not a competition, it's a conversation, an intricate layering of worldviews that have learned, over time, to coexist with surprising harmony. Christianity holds a prominent place, followed by roughly 4 out of 5 South Africans. But even that figure is only a doorway into something more complex. Within Christianity itself, the diversity is striking. There are towering cathedrals with stained glass windows and Latin chants. There are charismatic megachurches where preachers in sleek suits deliver fire and brimstone sermons to stadium-sized crowds. And then there are smaller, community-led churches, sometimes under canvas tents, sometimes under trees, where worship is an explosion of colour, movement, and sound. In many townships and rural areas, the African independent churches have flourished. These are not your average Sunday congregations. They blend Christian teachings with African cosmology, rituals, and symbols. Worshippers might wear white robes, carry staffs, and move in slow, synchronized processions. Hymns are sung in isiZulu or Sesotho, accompanied by drumming and ululation. The Bible sits comfortably alongside ancestral reverence, and healing is both spiritual and physical. Yet Christianity did not arrive in South Africa on a purely peaceful tide. Missionaries from Europe introduced it during the colonial era, often as part of broader efforts to civilize indigenous populations. While some of their work in education and medicine left lasting legacies, there was also cultural erasure and pressure to abandon traditional practices. Over time, South Africans began to reshape Christianity into something uniquely their own, fusing the imported with the indigenous in a way that speaks to resilience and reinvention. But to focus solely on Christianity would be to miss the dazzling plurality of belief in this country. Islam has deep roots here, especially among the Cape Malay community. Many of their ancestors were brought as slaves, exiles, or political prisoners from Indonesia, India, and East Africa by the Dutch in the 17th and 18th centuries. Today, mosques with crescent-topped minarets dot the streets of Cape Town, calling the faithful to prayer 5 times a day. During Ramadan, families gather for iftar meals with samosas, bueba, and sweet dates passed between generations. It's a quiet, grounding rhythm that adds another note to South Africa's spiritual song. Hinduism also holds a strong presence, particularly in Durban, which is home to one of the largest populations of Indian descent outside the subcontinent. Hindu temples stand brightly painted and delicately carved, offering prayers to deities with garlands, incense, and flame. Festivals like Diwali bring fireworks, feasts, and family reunions, turning the city into a tapestry of light and joy. The sound of devotional music drifts from doorways, and the scent of curry, sandalwood, and jasmine fills the air. Judaism, while representing a much smaller community, has a long and respected history in South Africa. Jewish families arrived in waves throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, mostly from Eastern Europe, escaping persecution and seeking new opportunities. Synagogues still stand in cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town, and Jewish South Africans have made contributions in every field, from law and medicine to music and politics. Their presence is a quiet thread woven carefully into the national fabric. There are also Buddhists, Baha'is, atheists, agnostics, Rastafarians, and spiritual seekers of all kinds. Freedom of religion is enshrined in South Africa's constitution, and while tensions occasionally surface, the general ethos leans toward coexistence. Spiritual expression, in whatever form it takes, is treated with a certain generosity of spirit. And then there are the traditional African belief systems, older than any church, mosque, or temple. These indigenous practices vary by region and culture, but they share some common threads. Chief among them is the reverence for ancestors, known as amadlozi or badimo in different languages. Ancestors are seen not as distant figures, but as active participants in daily life, guiding, protecting, and even correcting their descendants. Offerings of food or beer might be left at a family shrine. A goat may be slaughtered during a ceremony to ask for favour or forgiveness. Dreams are carefully interpreted, and illness is often understood as a spiritual imbalance as much as a physical one. These beliefs are not relics of the past. They are alive and evolving, carried in the gestures and choices of people across the country. At the heart of traditional healing is the Sangoma, a spiritual healer who undergoes years of training, visions, and initiation. Sangomas are consulted for everything from physical ailments to relationship troubles, lost items, or troubled dreams. They use herbs, bones, chants, and trance to access the spiritual realm and diagnose the root causes of a problem. In many communities, Sangomas are as respected as doctors, and often consulted in tandem with modern medicine. Sangomas are not witches or mystics in the Western sense. They are custodians of wisdom, interpreters of spiritual messages, and often emotional lifelines. To be chosen as a Sangoma is not a career decision. It is a calling. Many report being visited in dreams by ancestors, often resisting the path before eventually surrendering to it. Once initiated, they become part of a lineage that stretches back through time, a chain of knowledge passed down hand to hand. There are also places in South Africa where the land itself seems to shimmer with spiritual energy. Table Mountain in Cape Town, for instance, is more than just a scenic backdrop. Many indigenous traditions consider it sacred, a place of power, protection, and ancient memory. Locals sometimes speak of a magnetic presence there, a stillness that invites contemplation. Whether it's the cloud tablecloth that often rolls over its flat summit, or the fierce winds that suddenly whip through the city, Table Mountain feels like a character in its own right. In Limpopo province, Lake Fundudzi holds a similar mystique. Surrounded by forested hills and hidden from the main roads, this lake is sacred to the Venda people. Legend says it was created when a village was swallowed by water as punishment for disrespecting a holy woman. Today, it is protected by ritual, and traditional leaders perform sacred dances nearby to honour the spirits believed to dwell beneath its surface. The lake is rarely visited by outsiders and is approached with reverence by those who live nearby. These sacred sites serve as anchors in a country that has seen great upheaval. They are places where people go not just to pray, but to remember, to reconnect with something older, deeper, and enduring. In everyday life, the rhythm of belief plays out constantly. You can hear it in the call and response of a gospel service, where voices rise in harmony, filling the room like sunlight. You can see it in the intricate beadwork worn during a ceremony, each colour carrying symbolic weight. You can feel it in the silence before a family meal, heads bowed in gratitude not just for the food, but for the hands that prepared it and the ancestors who made it possible. Even music, ubiquitous in South African life, is often spiritual at its core. From the haunting harmonies of traditional isicathamiya singing to the fiery protest songs of the apartheid era, music has long served as both prayer and resistance. It's not unusual for a song to begin in church and end at a political rally, or vice versa. Memory, too, is a spiritual act here. Oral history remains a vital tradition, especially in rural areas. Stories are told around fires, in taxis, at weddings, during rites of passage. Each telling is a renewal, a way of binding the present to the past and the individual to the collective. Spirituality in South Africa is not just belief, it is belonging. It is the quiet strength in the face of hardship, the burst of joy in celebration, the whispered plea in moments of doubt. It is not something people put on for Sundays or special occasions. It is lived, breathed, danced, sung, and sometimes simply felt. In a country so full of scars and songs, perhaps that's what belief is most of all, a way to hold on. South Africa tells its story in flavours as much as in words. Each dish, each spice, each smoky puff of fire-kissed air is part of a broader narrative, one of migration, memory, celebration, and resilience. The nation's cuisine is not simply a collection of recipes. It is a lived experience, a series of edible postcards from a diverse and often complicated past. You won't need a Michelin guide here. Just follow your nose. At the centre of it all is the braai. More than a barbecue, the braai is a cultural cornerstone. It's about the sizzle of meat on open flames. Yes, but it's also about gathering, laughing, storytelling, and slowly passing around plates while time itself seems to take a back seat. Whether it's a backyard in Pretoria, a beach in the Eastern Cape, or a dusty roadside in Limpopo, the sight of coals glowing under a grill is a national signal. Something good is about to happen. Meat is king at a braai. Boerewors, spiced sausage coiled like a cinnamon bun, is a staple, its name translating simply to farmer's sausage. Chicken wings, pork chops, lamb ribs, and steak often follow, each marinated with secret family recipes that might involve garlic, chutney, or a splash of beer. But the real beauty of a braai is in its inclusivity. Everyone brings something, everyone has a say, and no one leaves hungry. Even vegetarians get a nod, with mealies, corn on the cob, charred to perfection, and mushroom skewers getting their time to shine. The rhythm of the braai is unhurried. Firewood or charcoal is stacked with ceremony. Someone takes the role of braai master, often self-appointed, fiercely proud, and unwilling to let anyone else flip the meat. Conversations meander from politics to football to weather, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional argument about whether gas grills count as real braais. For many, they absolutely do not. But South African food extends far beyond the fire pit. Let's start with something gloriously messy and deeply satisfying, bunny chow. Despite the name, it contains no rabbit. Originating in Durban's Indian community, bunny chow is a hollowed-out loaf of white bread filled with fragrant curry, typically lamb, chicken, or beans. It's street food with soul, spicy enough to wake up your sinuses and hearty enough to silence even the loudest appetite. No cutlery required, just grab the bread, scoop, and dive in. Alongside bunny chow, you might find chakalaka, a bright, punchy relish made from tomatoes, onions, peppers, carrots, and spices. It's the kind of dish that adapts to its maker. Some versions are mild, others fierce enough to clear your head. Chakalaka is often served cold and pairs beautifully with meat, pap, or whatever else is on the plate. Speaking of pap, it's impossible to discuss South African food without mentioning this humble yet beloved staple. Made from maize meal, and resembling a thick porridge, pap is comfort food incarnate. Eaten with stews, gravies, or scrambled eggs, it's versatile and satisfying. In some regions, it's soft and creamy, ideal for spooning. In others, it's firm enough to pinch into a scoop with your fingers and use like edible cutlery. Pap isn't just food, it's the canvas on which entire meals are built. Another grain-based comfort is samp and beans, a dish made from dried corn kernels and legumes, slow cooked until everything melds into a soft, creamy stew. Often flavoured with onions, stock, and a touch of garlic, it's hearty, inexpensive, and loaded with history. In rural areas, samp and beans is a dietary mainstay. In the cities, it's a nostalgic favourite. Either way, it nourishes in more ways than one. Then there's biltong, a South African national treasure that predates refrigerators and gourmet snack aisles. Think of it as beef jerky's more refined cousin, air-dried and spiced with vinegar, coriander, and black pepper. Traditionally made from beef, biltong can also come from game meats like kudu or ostrich. It's chewy, flavourful, and addictive, often served in thin slices and devoured during road trips, rugby matches, or right out of a brown paper bag. Some prefer it dry and crisp, others tender and marbled with fat. Either way, it rarely lasts long once opened. Alongside your biltong, you might enjoy rusks, hard, twice-baked biscuits meant to be dunked into tea or coffee until they soften just enough to crumble delightfully in your mouth. They're a morning ritual for many South Africans, especially in the countryside, with flavours like buttermilk, aniseed, or muesli. Rusks are both fuel and tradition. Every grandmother has her own recipe, and every family swears theirs is the best. Regional dishes offer even more insight into the country's culinary patchwork. In the Western Cape, Cape Malay cuisine tells a story of spice and survival. Descendants of enslaved people and exiles from Indonesia, Malaysia, and India developed a fusion style of cooking that features fragrant curries, pickled fish, and bobotie, a dish made with curried mince topped with a baked egg custard, often served with yellow rice and raisins. Sweet and savoury dance together here, echoing the complex history of the community that created it. In Xhosa kitchens, omankusho is a deeply cherished dish made from samp and sugar beans, sometimes cooked with butter or animal fat and served alongside meat or gravy. It's not flashy, but it is deeply satisfying, soul food in the truest sense. It's the kind of meal that warms your belly and reminds you of simpler times, even if you've never had it before. Durban, with its Indian influence, has a spice profile all its own. Curries here are fiery, rich, and unapologetic. You'll find roti rolls packed with potato curry, samosas sold at street corners, and masala mixes tailored to every household's preference. The city's food scene is a celebration of boldness. Heat, flavour, and colour turned up to maximum. And what would a South African day be without tea? Rooibos, or red bush tea, is a caffeine-free herbal infusion indigenous to the Cederberg Mountains. Earthy, slightly sweet, and rich in antioxidants, rooibos is more than a drink, it's a ritual. Whether taken plain, with honey, or steeped with spices, rooibos has a quiet charm. It's the tea you sip slowly, watching the sun dip behind the mountains or listening to rain tapping on the roof. When dessert rolls around, South Africans do not hold back. Milk tart, or melktert, is a national favourite. A custard pie dusted with cinnamon that's as light as it is indulgent. Some versions have a pastry crust, others a biscuit base. Either way, it vanishes quickly, especially if served with coffee or tea. Then there's malva pudding, a warm, spongy cake made with apricot jam and soaked in a buttery cream sauce. Often served with custard or ice cream, it is the stuff of post-bride dreams. Other sweet treats include Queck Sisters, braided deep-fried dough soaked in syrup, sticky and sweet enough to require a nap afterward, and Herzoggies, dainty tartlets with jam and coconut topping, named after a prime minister and forever associated with tea-time elegance. South African cuisine is not just about ingredients, it's about gathering, memory, and making the most of what's available. It reflects a history of colonisation, trade, hardship, and ingenuity. It's a place where spice met starch, where East met West, and where survival met creativity. Every dish has a backstory. Every flavour carries a whisper of ancestry, adaptation, and affection. Food here is rarely eaten alone. Meals are social occasions, no matter how small. Even a quick breakfast might involve a neighbour popping by, or a cousin showing up with leftovers just in case. Sharing is instinctive. Guests are expected to eat, even if they insist they're not hungry. And when people gather to eat, they also gather to speak, to argue, to laugh, and to remember. There is a phrase in isiZulu, ukudla yinto enkulu, which means food is a big thing. And indeed, in South Africa, food is never just fuel. It is a connection, a celebration, and sometimes a quiet act of defiance. In the worst times, people have kept culture alive through cooking. In the best times, they've used food to bring others in, to say, "You are welcome here." Whether it's the snap of boerewors on a hot grill, the tang of chakalaka on the tongue, or the soft sigh that follows the last spoonful of malva pudding, the flavours of South Africa stay with you. They don't ask for perfection, just appetite, curiosity, and a willingness to taste the story. In South Africa, music is more than a form of entertainment. It's a language, a memory, a heartbeat. It flows through the country's streets, churches, minibus taxis, and concert halls. It carries joy, grief, resistance, and rhythm in equal measure. For many South Africans, music is not something you listen to. It's something you live. Long before radio signals or recording studios, the land echoed with music made by hand. Traditional instruments still hold a sacred place in many communities, their sounds carrying the weight of centuries. The uhadi, for instance, is a single-stringed musical bow played by the Xhosa people. Made from a gourd resonator and animal gut, its soft, haunting tones are shaped by both the player's voice and the subtle shifting of the instrument's position against the chest. It's an intimate instrument, often used by women in ceremonial or storytelling contexts. Listening to it feels like overhearing a secret whispered between generations. Then there's the mbira, also known as the thumb piano. With its metal tines plucked inside a resonating box or gourd, the mbira creates cascading notes that sound almost celestial, gentle, meditative, and hypnotic. Originating from Zimbabwe, but also found in parts of South Africa, it's both an instrument and a spiritual tool, used in rituals, trance states, and ancestral communication. And who could forget the kudu horn? Made from the curved horn of the kudu antelope, this wind instrument produces deep, sonorous notes that were traditionally used for signalling across great distances. Its sound is earthy and commanding, like a call from the mountains themselves. In modern performances, the kudu horn occasionally makes an appearance as a powerful nod to heritage, evoking images of open plains and ancestral voices carried on the wind. But music in South Africa doesn't dwell only in the past. It's a river that rushes forward, constantly reshaping its banks. The 20th century saw the birth of entirely new genres. Sounds forged in the mines, the shebeens, the resistance movements, and the quiet strength of townships. Take Marabi, for example. Born in the slums of Johannesburg in the early 1900s, Marabi blended jazz, ragtime, and African melodies into something irresistibly danceable. It was played on upright pianos in underground bars, often on instruments missing keys or patched together from scraps. But the sound, syncopated, hypnotic, full of joy and defiance, was magic. Marabi laid the groundwork for mbaqanga, a genre that took root in the 1950s and exploded into the airwaves like a trumpet call. Mbaqanga added electric guitars, bass lines, and high-pitched vocals, creating a sound that was gritty, urban, and undeniably South African. The genre's heyday saw artists like the Mahotella Queens and Mahlathini becoming household names, their music filling dance floors and radio stations across the country. Then came Kwaito in the early 1990s, a genre born out of a changing nation. Post-apartheid youth, hungry to express their new reality, turned house music into something slower, funkier, and laced with township slang. Kwaito was bold, it swaggered. It talked about love, money, street life, and social change. Its pioneers, like Mandoza, Arthur Mafokate, and Boom Shaka, became cultural icons, blending music and fashion into an aesthetic of proud rebellion. Fast forward to today, and Gqom and Amapiano are the new rulers of the sonic landscape. Gqom, pronounced Gom, emerged from Durban's townships and brought with it a raw, minimalistic sound driven by heavy bass and sharp rhythm. It's not for the faint-hearted. Gqom hits like a thunderclap. It thrives in nightclubs, house parties, and sweaty dance circles where the floor itself seems to tremble. Amapiano, by contrast, is smoother, more melodic, and has taken South Africa, and increasingly the world, by storm. Built around jazzy keys, deep bass lines, and infectious log drum beats, Amapiano feels like cruising through a golden hour cityscape with the windows down and the music up. It's equal parts laid back and electric, the soundtrack to a new generation asserting its voice with grace and groove. But South African music is not just about rhythm and melody, it's about message. Few countries can boast a musical tradition so deeply tied to political resistance. During apartheid, music became both shield and sword. Protest songs known as struggle songs were sung at rallies, in prisons and in the streets. They lifted spirits, unified crowds, and reminded the oppressors that silence was never an option. One of the most iconic voices to rise from this era was Miriam Makeba, lovingly known as Mama Africa. Her voice was honey and fire. Banned from her homeland for speaking out, she carried South Africa's pain and beauty across the globe, using her music to shine a light on the injustices of apartheid. Songs like Pata Pata became global hits, but it was her presence, graceful, powerful, unyielding, that made her legendary. Then there's Hugh Masekela, the trumpet virtuoso whose music married jazz with township sounds. His song Bring Him Back Home became an anthem for Nelson Mandela's release, blending artistry with activism in the most seamless way. Masekela's music was full of longing, hope, and the unmistakable lilt of home. Brenda Fassie, often called the Madonna of the townships, brought pop and controversy in equal measure. Her powerful vocals, bold personality, and anthems like Vulindlela cemented her as a beloved and rebellious figure. Brenda didn't just sing, she declared, celebrated, and confronted. Her music lives on in every beat that makes a nation dance through hardship. Music in South Africa isn't confined to stages or streaming platforms. It's everywhere, all the time. In minibus taxis, which are often decked out with massive speakers and blaring amapiano tracks from dawn until dusk. A taxi ride here isn't just transport. It's a mobile club, a place where drivers and passengers nod to the same beat, where silence is the rarest sound of all. You'll hear music in markets, where traders sing or play old radios while hawking mangoes, avocados, or beadwork. At weddings, where choirs of relatives erupt into harmony before vows are even exchanged. At funerals, where gospel songs lift grief into something bearable, shared through chorus. And in churches, where even the most stoic among us might find themselves clapping, swaying, or letting a tear slip as voices rise in layered harmony. In fact, harmony is a defining feature of South African choral music. Groups like Ladysmith Black Mambazo introduced the world to isicathmoya, a style that combines soft vocals, tight harmonies, and gentle footwork. Rooted in Zulu migrant worker traditions, isicathmoya carries stories of longing and love, of nights spent far from home, sung quietly to avoid waking others in crowded hostels. It's a music of tenderness, resilience, and devotion. Even everyday sounds carry a musical quality. The rhythmic sweep of a broom on pavement, the call and response of greetings shouted across the street, the sing-song cadence of street vendors advertising vetkoek or airtime. It all blends into a national soundtrack that shifts with each neighbourhood and moment. In schools, children still learn traditional songs, some playful, others sacred. They clap, stomp, and sing in unison, not just to pass time, but to pass down identity. In high schools and universities, choirs remain popular, with competitions drawing passionate crowds and deep emotional investment. These aren't just performances, they're declarations of pride, connection, and cultural fluency. For many South Africans, music is the first thing they hear in the morning, and the last thing they hear at night. It marks time. It marks memory. It tells stories too painful to speak, and celebrates joys too great for words. It bridges languages, generations, and backgrounds. In a country with so many histories, music is one of the few things that unites everyone in motion. Whether it's an old go-go humming as she chops vegetables, a DJ spinning beats until sunrise, or a kid tapping rhythm on a school desk, the message is clear. South Africa doesn't just have music. It is music. It dances, sings, drums, and hums with life. Even in its silence, you can almost hear a melody waiting to begin. In South Africa, creativity isn't something kept in galleries behind velvet ropes. It spills out onto the streets, dances on walls, weaves itself into fabric, and curls into the smoke rising from clay kilns in dusty yards. Art here isn't just a reflection of culture. It's the culture itself, stitched into everyday life with bold colours and quiet reverence. Let's begin at the very beginning, long before paintbrushes, chisels, or charcoal pencils. In the caves and rock shelters of the Drakensberg Mountains and the Cederberg Range, the San people left behind a vast visual legacy. Using ochre, charcoal, and animal fat, they painted scenes of hunters, dancers, animals, and spiritual journeys that still cling to stone faces thousands of years later. These images weren't merely decorative, they were layered with symbolism, depicting not just what was seen, but what was felt, dreamed, or imagined. The sand rock art is among the oldest and most sophisticated in the world, capturing movement and emotion with astonishing clarity. In some paintings, eland antelope shimmer with supernatural energy. In others, human figures blend into animals, perhaps representing trance states or spiritual transformation. These artworks serve as a window into a world view where nature, spirit, and society existed in fluid harmony. And they remind us that art was one of humanity's earliest languages, long before the written word ever arrived. That spirit of expression didn't stay confined to cave walls. It evolved. It travelled through beadwork, pottery, weaving, and carving, forms of creativity that continue to flourish in homes, markets, and studios across the country. Beadwork is particularly iconic. For many South African cultures, beads are more than decoration. They're a form of communication. Among the Zulu, Xhosa, Ndebele, and Tswana, bead patterns and colours carry meaning, expressing identity, marital status, clan affiliation, and even emotional states. A carefully beaded necklace might say, "I am spoken for," while a bracelet might gently suggest, "I am not impressed." The designs are intricate, the work painstaking, and the results often breathtaking. In rural areas, beadwork is still taught from a young age, passed down as both skill and storytelling. And while traditional designs remain deeply respected, contemporary bead artists are now pushing boundaries, using the medium to create everything from fashion accessories to large-scale installations. In this art form, the past and present walk side by side, stitched together in tiny, colourful pieces. Pottery, too, has long been a canvas for cultural memory. Clay pots aren't just vessels for water or grain. They're expressions of community, heritage, and personal touch. Among the Venda, Zulu, and Sotho, women have historically shaped and fired pots by hand, often decorating them with geometric patterns or raised ridges. These markings are not random. They're signatures, clan symbols, or echoes of nature. Waves, hills, footprints. The firing process, usually done in open flame pits, adds an element of unpredictability, giving each piece a unique finish that no kiln could replicate. Wood carving is another treasured tradition, especially in regions like Limpopo and KwaZulu-Natal. Masks, headrests, stools, walking sticks and figurines are all lovingly shaped by hand, often from indigenous hardwoods like kieite or yellow wood. These carvings serve both practical and spiritual purposes. Some are used in ceremonies, others in daily life. Many are adorned with patterns that carry ancestral meaning. And while modern power tools have sped up the process in some workshops, the soul of the work remains in the hands of the carver, steady, patient, and deeply connected to their craft. Architecture, too, tells a creative story, one shaped by necessity, identity, and influence. Rural homes known as rondavels are a prime example. These circular structures, with their thatched roofs and earthen walls, are marvels of vernacular design. They're cool in summer, warm in winter, and built with locally sourced materials. In many communities, rondavels are painted with bold patterns, sometimes symbolic, sometimes simply joyful. Then there's the Cape Dutch architectural style, which arrived with the early European settlers and still defines much of the Western Cape's rural landscape. Characterised by whitewashed walls, ornate gables, and symmetrical layouts, These homes blend Dutch, German, and French elements into something uniquely South African. Walking through wine country, you'll see these structures nestled among vineyards, their simplicity offset by elegance. Modernist architecture made its mark too, especially in Johannesburg and Pretoria, where mid-20th century buildings reflect both the optimism and tensions of a changing nation. Concrete, glass, and steel speak a different visual language here, one that sometimes clashes and sometimes harmonises with the older colonial styles. And in more recent decades, innovative housing projects and eco-conscious designs have begun to reshape urban and rural landscapes alike. But some of the most vibrant art in South Africa isn't framed or signed. It's painted on walls, woven into fences, or built from found objects. Township murals, in particular, have transformed public spaces into open-air galleries. In neighbourhoods like Soweto, Khayelitsha, and Alexandra, walls become storytellers, depicting scenes of community, struggle, joy, and defiance. Some murals are playful, others political. Some are sponsored by art collectives, others by youth organisations or informal groups of friends armed with paint and purpose. These artworks aren't just expressions, they're acts of reclamation. In places long marginalised, murals offer visibility, colour, and pride. They say, "We are here. We matter. Look." Then there's the incredible world of recycled art. Sculptures, furniture, and installations made entirely from discarded materials. Artists in Johannesburg, Cape Town and beyond have turned scrap metal, bottle caps, tyres, and even plastic bags into masterpieces. These works are not only creative, they're sustainable, community-driven, and often deeply symbolic. A fish made from wire and soda cans might speak to water scarcity. A life-sized rhino sculpted from old tyres might raise awareness about poaching. In a world drowning in waste, South African artists are finding ways to build beauty from the rubble. Some of these artists have gained international acclaim. One of the most instantly recognisable is Esther Mahlangu, a Ndebele artist whose large-scale paintings and designs have appeared on everything from gallery walls to BMW cars. Mahlangu's work is rooted in the geometric patterns and bright colours of traditional Ndebele mural art, a style passed down from mother to daughter, traditionally painted on the walls of homes. She's taken that legacy and brought it into the global spotlight, all while staying grounded in her culture and village. Then there's William Kentridge, whose charcoal drawings, stop-motion animations, and theatrical installations have earned him worldwide praise. Kentridge's work grapples with memory, colonialism, industrialisation, and the lingering shadows of apartheid. His pieces are often monochrome, fragmented, and haunting, like dreams caught mid-thought. And yet they pulse with life, movement, and self-reflection. He doesn't offer answers. He poses questions, layered, uncomfortable, essential. In every corner of South Africa, from bustling cities to quiet hillsides, creativity blooms. It shows up in bead markets, street performances, gallery exhibits, school notebooks, and stitched quilts. It lives in hairstyles, clothing, signage, graffiti, and dance. Art is not something reserved for professionals. It's something people do, daily, instinctively, often without fanfare. Craftsmanship, too, holds a sacred place. Whether it's the carving of a ceremonial spoon, the weaving of a reed basket, or the stitching of a wedding garment, there is pride in the making. Each act of creation is a link in a long chain, connecting the present to ancestors, traditions to innovations. And perhaps that's the essence of South African art. It doesn't sit still. It moves, morphs, adapts. It speaks across boundaries of language, geography, and class. It confronts, celebrates, grieves, and dreams. It doesn't ask permission. It simply arrives, bold, brilliant, and unafraid. In a country with so many stories, so much contradiction, and so much beauty, art becomes a kind of truth. Not always literal, but always real. It tells us where we've been, who we are, and what we hope to become. And it does so in every colour, texture, and form imaginable. Before there were books, pens, or publishing houses, there were stories told under stars. In South Africa, storytelling has always been more than entertainment. It's how memory survives, how wisdom travels, and how identities are passed from generation to generation like heirlooms wrapped in words. Long before the printing press arrived, history here lived in the mouths of poets, the minds of elders, and the rhythms of oral tradition. In many African cultures, the spoken word holds immense power. A story well told is not simply informative, it is transformative. Praise poets, or imbongi in isiXhosa and isiZulu, have long held a respected place in society. They are not mere performers. They are historians, philosophers, and truth-tellers. With vivid metaphor and musical cadence, they chant the genealogies of kings, recall ancestral deeds, and sometimes, quite boldly, offer political critique wrapped in flattery. An imbongi might stand before a chief or president and recite a spontaneous, poetic composition full of booming declarations, intricate references, and just enough veiled sarcasm to raise eyebrows without crossing a line. Praise poetry is deeply rooted in clan identity. Every family has its own praises, known as isitakazelo, which can include the names of ancestors, totems, or qualities admired by the group. Children grow up learning these chants not from textbooks, but from listening. And when recited, these words act as a kind of passport, affirming belonging, heritage, and pride. Alongside the imbongi were the storytellers, those gifted in spinning tales about animals that talk, tricksters who outwit the strong, and moral fables with laughter baked into every line. These tales were told beside fires, in huts, on porches, and in the spaces between chores. They weren't just for children, they were for everyone. They taught generosity, caution, cleverness, and community. Then, with colonisation and the arrival of European languages and education systems, the written word began to take a new kind of hold. For a long time, most literature about South Africa was written from the outside looking in. Voyages, missionary journals, colonial reports. But gradually, South Africans began writing themselves into print. One of the earliest literary voices to emerge was Olive Schreiner, born in the 1850s in the Eastern Cape. Her novel, The Story of an African Farm, published in 1883, was groundbreaking for its time, delving into issues of gender, philosophy, and individual freedom. Schreiner was a woman ahead of her era, and though her work carried the world view of a white colonial woman, her sensitivity to social justice and her willingness to challenge norms made her an important early voice in South African literature. Then came Saul Plaatje, a man of many talents, journalist, translator, linguist, politician, and one of the founding members of the African National Congress. Born in 1876, Plaatje wrote in multiple languages and was a passionate advocate for African rights under colonial and segregationist rule. His novel Moody, written in the 1920s but published posthumously in 1930, is widely regarded as the first novel in English by a black South African. Moody blends history, romance and folklore, telling the story of a woman caught in the upheaval of intertribal conflict and early colonial violence. It's a work that bridges oral and written traditions, with prose that echoes the rhythms of storytelling by firelight. Planche's writings, fiction and non-fiction alike, were acts of resistance, a way of documenting dignity in an era intent on denying it. As the 20th century unfolded, South African literature became increasingly shaped by the political realities of the day. Under apartheid, which began officially in 1948, writing became both weapon and refuge. The system sought to divide, suppress, and silence. Writers pushed back through plays, novels, essays, and poetry that exposed injustice and imagined liberation. Nadine Gordimer, a white writer deeply critical of apartheid, earned international acclaim for her searing portrayals of life under the regime. Her prose was often spare and sharp, her characters caught in the moral, grey zones of a divided society. Gordimer was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1991, recognised not only for her literary achievements, but for her unwavering voice against censorship and oppression. Athol Fugard, meanwhile, brought South African stories to the stage. His plays, like Sizwe Banzi is Dead, The Island, and Master Harold, and The Boys, gave voice to characters marginalised by law, but rich in humanity. Working closely with black actors like John Carney and Winston Nshona, Fugard helped create a theatre of truth during a time when truth was dangerous. His work was often banned in South Africa, but celebrated abroad, showing just how powerful a spotlight could be. Other writers chose poetry as their battlefield. Names like Mongane Wally Soroti, Sifo Sipamla, and Oswald Mitchell wrote verses that pulsed with urban energy, defiance, and sorrow. Their poems captured township life, police brutality, broken homes, and fragile dreams. These weren't abstract musings. They were raw dispatches from the front lines of survival. In exile, writers like Bessie Head and Alex Laguma continued the work from abroad, penning novels that explored alienation, identity, and memory. Their words crossed borders when their bodies could not. The pen in their hands was a compass and a protest sign all at once. After the fall of apartheid in 1994, South African literature entered a new chapter, one marked by freedom but also uncertainty. The end of formal censorship didn't mean the end of questions. What stories now needed to be told? How could a country so long silenced learn to speak all at once? Into this moment stepped a new generation of writers, bold, diverse, and unafraid to explore complexity. Zaks Emda emerged as one of the most acclaimed voices of the post-apartheid era. His novel, The Heart of Redness, weaves past and present into a narrative that explores belief, betrayal, and the lingering ghosts of colonialism. Emda's writing blends magical realism with historical precision, painting South Africa not in black and white, but in the layered tones of paradox. Kopano Matlwa, a doctor and novelist, speaks powerfully to the experience of young, black South Africans navigating modernity, identity, and inequality. Her debut novel, Coconut, won awards for its sharp, witty exploration of race and class in a supposedly new South Africa. Matlwa's prose is crisp and emotional, capturing both personal and collective unrest. Other authors, Lauren Bukes, Sifiso Mzobi, Tfando Munkolozana, and many more, are bringing fresh styles and perspectives to the literary scene. Some are writing speculative fiction set in futuristic Johannesburgs. Others are crafting intimate memoirs of love, loss, and legacy. There are LGBTQ voices, immigrant voices, and voices from rural villages all joining the chorus. South African literature today is as multifaceted as the country itself, wildly different in form, united in the search for truth. Storytelling remains a form of resistance, even in peace. Because remembering is political. Forgetting is too. By writing down what was once only whispered, South African authors are preserving the textures of a nation still in motion, its beauty, its brokenness, and its boundless complexity. Books are often shared informally, passed between friends, sold at street corners, or read aloud at community gatherings. Libraries, once rare or poorly stocked in many areas, are becoming centres of learning and pride. And in recent years, a vibrant culture of literary festivals, spoken word performances, and reading clubs has emerged. In cities and small towns alike, people are coming together not just to read, but to reflect. The rise of digital platforms has added new layers to this revival. Podcasts, online zines, Instagram poets, and YouTube storytellers are creating work that reaches far beyond traditional formats. South African voices are not just being heard at home, they're echoing around the globe, resonating with anyone who has ever struggled, hoped, or sought to understand where they came from. In the end, whether carved on cave walls, performed in a village square, typed on a battered keyboard, or spoken between friends at midnight, stories matter. They make sense of the senseless. They offer connection in a world that so often feels fractured. In South Africa, the stars are not just in the sky. They live in the voices of poets, the hands of writers, and the minds of those who listen and remember. The stories here aren't just written in ink. They're written in spirit, and they shine. South Africa plays with its whole heart. Whether it's a stadium packed to the rafters or a dusty backyard with a handmade ball, sport here is not just about points and trophies. It's about identity, expression, and resilience. It's about laughter, pride, and sometimes healing. If you want to understand the soul of South Africa, you'd do well to start with a ball in motion. 3 sports reign supreme in the national imagination: rugby, soccer, and cricket. The Holy Trinity. Each carries its own set of heroes, legends, and histories. Each stirs different parts of the collective spirit. Rugby, for a long time, was the preserve of the white Afrikaner community. A tough, physical sport with roots in British colonial tradition, it was taken up and transformed into a symbol of Afrikaner pride and masculinity. During the apartheid years, the Springbok jersey, green and gold, became deeply political. For many, it symbolised exclusion and oppression. The team was seen as representing only a fraction of the population. Rugby matches were powerful cultural events for white South Africans, but painful reminders for many others of the divisions enforced by law and violence. And yet, in a twist almost too poetic to believe, rugby also became one of the most iconic tools of national unity. The year was 1995. Apartheid had officially ended, and South Africa was hosting the Rugby World Cup. Nelson Mandela, then newly elected as president, saw an opportunity not to erase history, but to reframe it. When he walked onto the field wearing a Springbok jersey and cap, items still seen by many black South Africans as symbols of apartheid, he took a risk. But what followed was extraordinary. The moment Mandela handed the trophy to Captain Francois Pienaar after the Springboks' victory over New Zealand is etched into the national memory like a folktale. The crowd chanted, "Nelson! Nelson!" not just in celebration of the win, but in awe of the gesture. That day, rugby was not just a game, it was a bridge. It didn't fix everything, but it showed what was possible when courage meets symbolism in just the right way. Soccer, or football, depending on where you're listening, is the people's game. It's played everywhere, by everyone. From manicured stadiums, to fields with no grass, no nets, and sometimes no ball. Just a tightly bundled heap of plastic bags, wrapped in twine. Soccer is joy made kinetic. South Africa's national team, Bafana Bafana, rose to prominence after apartheid, playing their first international match in 1992. Their biggest triumph came in 1996, when they won the Africa Cup of Nations on home soil, just 2 years after the first democratic elections. It was a moment of shared euphoria, a loud and colourful celebration that spilled out of stadiums into streets, shebeens, and households across the country. Club football thrives too, with giants like Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates commanding massive support. These two teams, both based in Soweto, have a rivalry so fierce it makes the earth vibrate on derby days. Fans dress in bold colours, blow vuvuzelas, paint their faces, and dance in the stands with the kind of energy usually reserved for spiritual revivals. And in many ways, these games are spiritual, rites of passion, loyalty, and release. Cricket, though often associated with afternoon teas and polite applause, has its own firm place in South Africa's sporting story. Brought in by the British, it grew into a beloved sport among many communities, especially in the Western Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. Despite being barred from international competition during apartheid, the sport continued to flourish at grassroots levels, with players of colour organising their own leagues and producing talent that defied the odds. Post-apartheid, the Proteas, South Africa's national cricket team, have achieved success and heartbreak in equal measure. There's a particular term, choking, often thrown around due to some infamous World Cup exits, but South Africans remain loyal, ever hopeful for that one glorious finish. Players like Makaya Ntini, the first black African to play for the Proteas, became symbols of transformation and excellence, inspiring a new generation of cricketers who see themselves not just as participants, but as contenders. Yet sport in South Africa is not confined to the big three. Beneath the spotlight, a rich tapestry of indigenous games continues to thrive, some passed down quietly through generations, others enjoying a renewed surge in popularity. Take Dibeke, for example. This fast-paced, high-energy game is played with a ball and involves a mix of running, dodging, and team coordination. Often played in schoolyards, it's similar to a combination of dodgeball and netball, but with its own unique set of rules and rhythms. It's fiercely competitive, loudly cheered, and a regular feature at inter-school tournaments across the country. Then there's Jukske, a game with deep Afrikaner roots that dates back over 200 years. Originally developed by transport riders who used the wooden pins from their ox wagons to pass the time, Jukske involves throwing these pins at a target stake, trying to knock it over from a distance. It's strategic, slow burning, and has all the charm of a game played under trees, with plenty of banter and a flask of coffee. Coho, Morabaraba, and Kati, more traditional games still, are finding their way into modern curriculums, youth clubs, and heritage celebrations. Some involve physical skill, others mental agility. All of them reflect a cultural richness that goes far beyond televised sport. Street play, too, is its own genre. In townships and inner-city neighbourhoods, you'll find children and teenagers setting up impromptu soccer matches with makeshift goals and no time limits. These games are fast, creative, and often hilariously chaotic. Sides are uneven, rules are negotiable, and skill is the ultimate currency. It's here, on these unofficial pitches, that many of South Africa's greatest players first learned to dribble, pass, and dream. Beyond formal competition, sport is also celebration. On public holidays, you might find neighbours organising cricket matches with plastic bats and chalk-drawn stumps. At family gatherings, a rugby ball will inevitably appear, tossed lazily between cousins before escalating into a full contact brawl involving multiple generations. And on school sports days, parents turn out in droves, cheering so loudly you'd think Olympic gold was on the line. But perhaps what stands out most about South African sport is the way it reflects the nation's character. There's a certain grit in the way teams play, a refusal to back down, even when the odds are lopsided. Fans might groan, shout at the television, or bemoan the latest scandal, but the passion never fades. Losing is painful, but apathy is unthinkable. Sport also acts as a mirror, showing the country where it still needs to grow. Issues of inclusion, access, and equity remain hot topics. Conversations about race and representation continue in locker rooms, press conferences, and living rooms. But these discussions, however difficult, are part of the process. They show that people care, not just about who wins, but about who gets to play. The legacy of that care is visible in programs aimed at developing talent in under-resourced areas, in athletes who use their platforms to advocate for change, and in fans who believe fiercely that their cheers matter. In South Africa, a crowd is never just a backdrop. It's a participant. It carries the game, shapes its mood, and sometimes even tips the balance. And then there's the celebration, the spontaneous, unapologetic joy when a goal is scored, a try is made, or a wicket falls at just the right time. South Africans don't hold back. They sing, they dance, they blow vuvuzelas with the enthusiasm of a nation that knows just how fleeting victory can be. Every win is cherished. Every shared moment of sporting glory becomes a thread in the national tapestry. From the thud of feet on township turf to the roar of fans at Ellis Park, the sound of South Africa at play is unmistakable. It is loud, spirited, and full of contradictions. It is rooted in history, shaped by struggle, and always looking forward. In a country where the past is often heavy, sport offers lightness. It is escape and connection, sweat and celebration, rivalry and unity. It's a reminder that even in the face of complexity, there is room, always, for play. There is a certain magic to how South Africa celebrates. Not in a quiet, polite kind of way, but with drums, dancing, fireworks, and a full plate in hand. Festivals here don't merely mark dates on a calendar. They capture the rhythm of a people who have learned, over centuries, to turn hardship into harmony and tradition into joy. Every celebration, whether rooted in religion, history, or the changing of the seasons, feels like an invitation to join the party, no matter where you're from. One of the most heartfelt national celebrations is Heritage Day, held every year on the 24th of September. Officially, it's about recognising and honouring the diverse cultures, languages, and traditions that make up the Rainbow Nation. Unofficially, it's also known as Braai Day, and that alone should tell you something about the country's priorities. On Heritage Day, people pull out their traditional clothing, share family recipes, and fire up their grills. In townships and suburbs alike, the scent of boerewors and marinated chicken fills the air. Neighbours exchange plates. Music spills out of open doors. Children race through the streets with sticky fingers and big smiles. It's a reminder that unity doesn't have to mean sameness. Sometimes it's found in difference, celebrated side by side, with a generous portion of chakalaka. Freedom Day, on the 27th of April, marks the anniversary of South Africa's first democratic elections in 1994. It's a day of reflection and celebration, filled with speeches, concerts, and commemorations. But beyond the official events, it's also deeply personal. Families gather to tell stories, remember the sacrifices of those who fought for liberation, and celebrate how far the country has come. Schools and communities host performances and poetry readings. Flags wave, songs rise. There's a sense of pride that, even with all its challenges, the nation chose freedom, and continues to choose it every day. The 16th of December brings the Day of Reconciliation, a holiday as complex as it is profound. Originally commemorated by Afrikaners as the Day of the Vow, a religious and historical remembrance, it was reimagined post-apartheid as a day to reflect on the wounds of the past and the hope of healing. Across the country, communities host dialogues, art exhibitions, and cultural events aimed at bridging divides. It's not always easy, and the conversations can be tough, but the day stands as a symbol of the ongoing effort to build a future rooted in mutual respect. Beyond the public holidays are festivals that burst with colour, music, and sheer human joy. In Cape Town, the Cape Town Carnival transforms the city's streets into a kaleidoscope of costume, dance, and drumming. Held in March, it draws thousands of spectators who line the roads to watch performers in glittering outfits glide, twirl, and stomp their way through the city. Floats, stilt walkers, and samba bands celebrate not just spectacle, but creativity and community. The carnival isn't just entertainment, it's a canvas for self-expression. In the small university town of Makanda, formerly known as Grahamstown, the National Arts Festival takes over for 11 days each winter. It's the largest celebration of its kind in the country and among the biggest on the continent. The whole town becomes a stage, with plays, music, dance, and visual art filling theatres, school halls, churches, and open fields. It's where emerging talent and established artists rub shoulders, where avant-garde meets grassroots, and where imagination has no limits. For many, it's not just a festival, it's a pilgrimage. Durban, with its large Indian community, lights up each year for Diwali, the Festival of Lights. Streets and homes are adorned with candles, oil lamps and fireworks. Sweet treats are shared among neighbours, and temples fill with a scent of incense and jasmine. The celebration is both sacred and joyous, a reaffirmation of good triumphing over evil and light over darkness. Cape Town celebrates Eid with equal vibrancy. Muslim communities come together for morning prayers, followed by feasting and visits to friends and relatives. Markets buzz with activity, selling samosas, biryanis, and sweetmeats. Children show off new clothes, and homes are open to guests. Eid is a time of gratitude and generosity, and in true South African fashion, the celebration often spills beyond religious lines. Neighbours of different faiths join in, drawn by the spirit of inclusion. In Johannesburg and other cities, Jewish communities mark Passover with shaders that recount the story of Exodus and liberation. Families gather around candlelit tables to read, eat, sing and remember. These rituals, steeped in tradition, are part of the broader South African tapestry, a reminder that the country's spiritual and cultural landscape is as diverse as its terrain. Then there are the quiet festivals, the ones that don't come with parades or fireworks, but arrive with the seasons. The first rains of summer in the Highveld bring a kind of celebration all their own. After months of dry, dusty air, the skies finally open, and the scent of petrichor, rain on dry earth, rises like a promise. Children run into the streets to splash in puddles. Farmers breathe easier. The air changes, and with it, the mood of a nation. Spring arrives with jacaranda blossoms, painting cities like Pretoria and Johannesburg in a surreal purple hue. Streets turn into floral tunnels. Petals carpet sidewalks. It's exam season for students, and legend has it that if a jacaranda flower falls on your head, you'll pass. Whether or not it's true, the blossoms offer a kind of magic, a fleeting, fragrant reminder that beauty can come quietly, unexpectedly, and in full bloom. The harvest moons, particularly in rural communities, are a time to give thanks. While not marked by official calendars, these moments are celebrated in small but significant ways, through communal meals, traditional dancing, and offerings of thanks. The rhythms of agriculture, though increasingly distant for many urban dwellers, still beat strongly in the countryside. And no conversation about celebration would be complete without mentioning firelight. Across the country, people gather around fires, not just to cook, but to connect. At braais, at campouts, at storytelling sessions and family gatherings, the fire is a companion. It crackles, dances, and throws long shadows. It warms hands and hearts. Music often follows. Guitars, drums, voices rising in harmony. Sometimes the songs are old. Sometimes they're made up on the spot. Either way, they belong. South Africans know how to mark a moment. They do it with music, food, dance, and shared space. They do it with reverence and with laughter, often at the same time. They do it in big, splashy ways and in quiet rituals passed down through generations. Every festival, every feast, every season shift is a chance to pause and be present, to honour where they've come from, who they are, and where they hope to go. It's in these gatherings, under sun or stars, with plates full and voices loud, that the spirit of the country shines brightest. Not despite the struggles, but often because of them. Celebration here is not about perfection, it's about perseverance. It's about making something joyful with what you have, and doing it together. In South Africa, the land itself seems to breathe with ancient rhythm. Mountains rise like sentinels. Deserts bloom with impossible flowers. And animals walk trails etched into the earth long before humans came along. It is a place where wilderness still whispers, roars, and on occasion stomps its way through the landscape. This isn't just scenery. It's a living, shifting theatre of creatures, ecosystems, and elements, unfolding every day with quiet majesty or thunderous flair. If you've ever heard the term Big Five, it might conjure images of a safari poster or a lodge brochure. But the original meaning comes from old hunting terminology, referring to the 5 most dangerous animals to hunt on foot: lion, leopard, elephant, buffalo, and rhinoceros. Thankfully, most people today prefer to shoot them only with cameras, binoculars, and an enthusiastic gasp. Seeing even one of these animals in the wild is unforgettable. Seeing all 5 is something people travel halfway around the world for. The African elephant, the largest land mammal on Earth, ambles across open plains and dusty roads with a kind of patient power. Its ears flap like giant fans. Its trunk sniffs the air, and every step seems deliberate, as if the elephant remembers something you've forgotten. In places like Kruger National Park, watching a herd move across the landscape is like witnessing an ancient ritual still in motion. Then there's the rhinoceros. Both black and white species roam South Africa, though they remain perilously close to extinction. The white rhino is larger and more social, grazing on grasslands with its square lip and surprisingly gentle demeanour. The black rhino is smaller, more solitary, and a little more irritable, with a hooked lip perfect for nibbling shrubs. Their horns, tragically coveted, have made them targets for poachers, despite relentless conservation efforts. Lions, with their golden coats and regal stares, are the undeniable stars of the savannah. They rest in shady clumps during the heat of day, often looking disinterested, until suddenly they're not. A twitch of the ear, a lift of the head, and in moments they're a blur of coordinated muscle and instinct. Hearing a lion roar at night while tucked in a canvas tent is one of those sounds that echoes inside you for hours, if not years. Leopards are the elusive aristocrats of the bush, solitary, silent, and stunning. Often found lounging in trees with their tails dangling like lazy commas, they move like shadows. You'll be lucky to spot one, and if you do, count yourself in rare company. They are nature's master escape artists, as comfortable on rocky ledges as they are slinking across riverbeds. Cape buffalo, round and stocky with curved horns like battle helmets, tend to travel in herds and stare you down with a gaze that says, "Don't even think about it." They're not flashy, but they're fiercely respected in the wild. Their unpredictability has earned them a reputation as the most dangerous of the 5, especially when injured or cornered. Yet the Big 5 are only the headline act. South Africa is home to a vast cast of wild characters. Pangolins, rare, shy, and armoured like pine cones, trundle along under moonlight, curling into perfect balls when threatened. African wild dogs, with their mottled coats and giant ears, hunt in packs with eerie precision and a strong sense of teamwork. They're endangered, but populations survive in protected areas, dashing across open land with astonishing speed. Cheetahs stretch out on termite mounds before springing into chase, their spines bending like bowstrings mid-stride. Giraffes nibble acacia leaves with purple tongues, while hippos wallow in muddy pools like floating boulders that suddenly snort. Warthogs trot nervously through the underbrush, tails held high like antennae. Even the birds demand attention. Hornbills, weavers, kingfishers, and the show-stopping lilac-breasted roller with its impossible plumage. Kruger National Park is perhaps the crown jewel of South Africa's conservation areas. Spanning nearly 20,000 square kilometres, it's larger than many countries. The park offers a staggering diversity of habitats and species, from crocodile-filled rivers to lion-haunted plains. Self-drivers follow dusty roads through mopane thickets and open grasslands, stopping at waterholes where entire dramas unfold between predator and prey. Addo Elephant National Park, in the Eastern Cape, began as a sanctuary for just 11 elephants. Today, it protects over 600, along with lions, hyenas, and a surprisingly robust population of dung beetles, which have right of way on the park's roads. The terrain here is different, brushy, dense, and often dotted with speckboom, a miracle plant known for its carbon-absorbing superpowers. The Drakensberg Mountains stretch in dramatic folds along the country's eastern spine, towering and mist-shrouded, home to baboons, eland, and rare birds like the bearded vulture. This is a place of hidden waterfalls, ancient rock art, and air so crisp it feels like a tonic. The name means Dragon Mountains, and standing among them, you half expect something mythical to take flight from the cliffs. Table Mountain, the flat-topped guardian of Cape Town, might seem tame in comparison, but its biodiversity is anything but. The mountain is part of the Cape Floristic region, one of the richest floral kingdoms on Earth. Despite covering less than 1% of Africa's landmass, it contains almost 20% of the continent's plant species, many found nowhere else. This explosion of plant life includes the Fynbos biome, a scrubby, aromatic wonderland filled with proteas, ericas, and restios. Fynbos isn't showy at first glance. Its charm lies in its variety and endurance. These plants are adapted to fire, drought, and rocky soil, yet they bloom with astonishing intricacy. The king protea, South Africa's national flower, unfurls like a crown, regal, delicate, and defiant. The Namaqualand wildflower bloom is another botanical miracle. For most of the year, this semi-desert looks parched and barren. But come spring, after just a hint of rain, the land explodes into colour. Oranges, purples, pinks and yellows blanket the ground in a patchwork so vivid it seems digitally enhanced. People travel for hours to see it, and somehow it never looks the same twice. For those drawn to the sea, Hermanus offers some of the world's best land-based whale watching. From June to November, southern right whales migrate to these waters to mate, calve, and generally enjoy the good life. You can spot them from cliffs, beaches, or even while sipping tea at a cafe. Occasionally, one will breach, a full-body leap into the air, landing with a thunderous splash that leaves jaws hanging and phones scrambling to record. But amid all this splendour lies a sobering truth. South Africa's ecosystems are under pressure. Poaching, habitat loss, climate change and pollution all pose serious threats. Rhinos continue to fall to illegal horn trade despite valiant protection efforts. Pangolins, the most trafficked mammal in the world, are being hunted to extinction for their scales. Coral reefs are bleaching. Wetlands are shrinking. And yet, hope persists, not in grand gestures, but in tireless work and quiet victories. Conservation efforts across South Africa are deeply committed and often community-based. Private reserves, national parks, NGOs, and local leaders are working together to protect species and educate the next generation of custodians. Anti-poaching units, some made up entirely of women, patrol with dedication and courage. Rescue centres rehabilitate orphaned animals. Projects like the Black Mamba Anti-Poaching Unit or the Cheetah Outreach Foundation are blending science, passion, and public engagement in powerful ways. There's also growing recognition that humans and wildlife must find ways to coexist, not compete. Initiatives in ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and rewilding are slowly reshaping how land is used and valued. Even urban areas are becoming more nature conscious, with green corridors and biodiversity gardens bringing life back into concrete spaces. It's not always easy. Conservation is a long game, full of setbacks and complexity. But South Africa has something powerful in its favour. A deep cultural respect for nature that lives in language, in folklore, and in the simple act of looking up at a mountain or out across a savannah and whispering, "Wow." Because here, the wild is not something distant. It's a neighbour, a teacher, and sometimes a mirror. In the blink of an impala's eye, the trumpet of an elephant, or the shy curl of a pangolin, there is a reminder. We are not separate from the earth, but of it. And in protecting its beauty, we are protecting the best in ourselves. Modern-day South Africa is a patchwork in motion. It's woven from city skylines and township streets, from hashtags and head wraps, from tradition and innovation standing side by side at a street corner. It's a country where the past is never far behind, but neither is the future. Here, the everyday is a mosaic of languages, colours, contradictions, and creativity. A living tapestry that shifts with every footstep, every click, and every beat that drops from a passing car. Johannesburg, affectionately called Jozi, Joburg, or Igoli, the City of Gold, is the heartbeat of the hustle. It pulses with ambition. Skyscrapers stretch into the high-veiled sky, and the sidewalks are always moving, even when the traffic isn't. This is a place where dreams walk quickly, briefcases bump shoulders with beaded necklaces, and a pop-up thrift market might share an alley with a financial consultancy. Entrepreneurs, artists, and corporate climbers all share the same streets, and everyone seems to be building something. Businesses, reputations, playlists, empires. Downtown Johannesburg has undergone a renaissance in recent years. Places like Maboneng Precinct, once neglected, are now brimming with galleries, rooftop bars, co-working spaces, and murals that stretch stories high. Cafes serve up flat whites with almond milk, and next door, a Sangoma might still offer ancestral guidance. It's not seamless. There are still deep inequalities and social divides. But the city moves forward, not with polish, but with persistence, and a swagger all its own. Cape Town, meanwhile, leans back a little, with Table Mountain standing sentry and two oceans kissing its shores. It's easy to see why the city carries itself with a relaxed elegance. There's a kind of casual coolness here, barefoot on the beach by morning, wine tasting by afternoon, gallery hopping by night. The creative scene thrives, blending indigenous craft with avant-garde design. Studios are hidden in warehouses and upmarket boutiques alike, and on any given day you might stumble into a fashion shoot, a music video, or a protest march. Because in Cape Town, aesthetics and activism often go hand in hand. Durban, hugging the warm Indian Ocean, brings a different rhythm altogether. The city's tropical climate, spicy food, and laid-back attitude make it feel like an endless summer. Surfboards and saris share the sand. Mosques, temples, and churches line the same streets. The promenade along the beach buzzes with joggers, cyclists, and vendors selling everything from bunny chow to bangles. Durban's large Indian population, Zulu heritage, and reggae-infused nightlife give it a flavour you won't find anywhere else. It's vibrant, flavourful, and utterly itself. Across all these urban centres, a youthful energy is shaping what South Africa looks and sounds like today. More than half the population is under the age of 30, and they're creating culture at light speed. Fashion isn't just about trends, it's a language. Streetwear brands mix Xhosa proverbs with bold graphics. Thrifted denim is paired with handmade beadwork. Braids, locks, and afros are worn like crowns. Every outfit is a statement of identity, resistance, pride, or sometimes just a great day in front of the mirror. Social media, particularly Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, or X, depending on the branding cycle, has given rise to a generation of influencers who don't just follow global trends, they remix them. You'll find creators filming skits in township slang, dancers turning Amapiano beats into global choreography, and vloggers showcasing local fashion markets, rural homesteads, and urban rooftop sunsets with the same level of flair. This isn't borrowed culture, it's original content, and it travels fast. South African youth slang is its own dazzling dialect, a blend of English, Afrikaans, Zulu, Tsotsitaal, and pure invention. Words like awe, show, scheme, and aish carry inflection, mood, and backstory. Grootman might refer to an older brother or a streetwise mentor. Spaza is your local informal store. Joel means to party, and chommy is your pal. It's language that moves with music, tightens in inside jokes, and reinvents itself constantly. And speaking of movement, nothing defines the pace of modern South Africa quite like the minibus taxi. Love them or fear them, these fast-moving, finger-signalling, hooter-happy vans are the lifeblood of daily transport for millions. There are no fixed timetables, no digital ticketing systems, and often no seatbelts. But somehow the system works. Routes are passed down like folklore. Hand gestures serve as navigation tools. A conductor leans out the window, shouting destinations with rhythmic flair. You hop in, you pass the fare forward, you squeeze tighter to make room for the next person. It's chaos and choreography all at once. Taxis aren't just transport, they're mobile mixtapes. The music is loud, unapologetically local, and curated with pride. Gukom, Amapiano, house, and gospel all take their turn. Inside the taxi, you'll find a cross-section of the country. Students heading to lectures, vendors off to market, office workers reading the news, and toddlers sleeping through the bumps. Daily life thrives in the informal economy too. Street vendors line roadsides and intersections, selling everything from fresh fruit to phone chargers. Corner cafes, often no larger than a broom closet, serve vetkoek, fat cakes, and coffee brewed in battered kettles. Hair salons spill onto sidewalks, with laughter, gossip, and the hum of clippers filling the air. There's a vibrancy here that no mall could replicate. Technology, especially mobile tech, has become the great equalizer. South Africa is one of the most connected nations on the continent, with smartphone penetration allowing access to everything from banking to education to music production. Mobile money platforms and delivery apps are thriving, even in areas where physical infrastructure lags behind. Entrepreneurs build businesses on WhatsApp. Farmers check weather forecasts and market prices from rural villages. Teens stream tutorials on makeup, coding, or ukulele, sometimes all three. This digital boom has opened doors, especially in townships where traditional job markets have failed to keep up. In Khayelitsha, Soweto, and other urban townships, you'll find tech hubs, innovation labs, and co-working spaces designed not just for profit, but for upliftment. Young coders build apps to address local problems. Designers collaborate with artisans to blend modern aesthetics with traditional techniques. There's a gritty optimism in these spaces, a belief that even if the system doesn't serve you, you can still build your own. But the modern tapestry isn't just entrepreneurial. It's emotional, social, and deeply human. Gender roles are shifting, slowly but surely. Women are rising in every field, from politics to science to streetwear, and refusing to be boxed in. South African feminists are pushing hard against patriarchal norms, advocating for safety, education, and respect. Campaigns like Number AMI Next have brought the conversation around gender-based violence into the national spotlight, demanding change with urgency and force. Queer voices are rising too, despite ongoing challenges. South Africa was the first country in Africa to legalise same-sex marriage, and the LGBTQ+ community continues to shape fashion, music, art, and activism. Pride parades wind through major cities. Drag shows sell out in backstreet venues. Conversations about identity and inclusion are happening in classrooms, dinner tables, and cultural forums. The journey is ongoing, but the visibility is growing, and with it, the language to express a fuller range of human experience. Even the idea of tradition is being redefined. You'll see someone attending an ancestral ceremony in full regalia on Saturday and hosting a YouTube channel on skincare routines by Sunday. Young South Africans are finding ways to honour their roots without being confined by them. The result is a cultural space where ululating and vlogging might both be considered acts of self-expression. In all this flux, there's something remarkably consistent: the resilience of spirit. Despite high unemployment, load shedding, service delivery struggles, and deep historical wounds, there remains a kind of tenacity in how people live, laugh, and look ahead. South Africans know how to pivot, how to innovate, how to dance in the gaps. And perhaps that's what defines this modern moment. Not perfection, but participation. Everyone's creating, critiquing, contributing. The tapestry is frayed in places, yes, but it's still warm, still beautiful, still being stitched together, one story, one post, one ride in a minibus taxi at a time. South Africa is a land that refuses to be reduced to a single narrative. It's not just one rhythm, one flavour, one way of being. From city skyscrapers to seaside shacks, from vineyards stretching toward the horizon to rocky footpaths worn by barefoot schoolchildren, this country contains multitudes. It's a home of many colours, not only in the literal sense, but in every layer of life, landscape, and legacy. One of the most striking contrasts is that of urban versus rural. Cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town race ahead with fast-paced lifestyles, dense traffic, and an ever-present hum of movement. People hustle from high-rise offices to cafe meetings, swipe through mobile apps to order food or hail taxis, and juggle work, family, and social calendars with practiced precision. In the city, time is currency. Life is lived in quick bites, calendar alerts, and coffee cups on the go. But the moment you leave the metro behind, sometimes just an hour or two down the road, the tempo shifts. In the countryside, time stretches. Conversations linger. The air smells of soil or sea, not exhaust fumes. And the nearest shop might be a bumpy drive away, not a quick hop to the corner. Here, community takes on a different flavour. People know each other's birthdays, whose cow wandered where, and which child just passed Matrix. Farms in the northern provinces offer an entirely different reality from the glass towers of the Gauteng skyline. In Limpopo or the Free State, wide fields of maize, citrus, or sunflowers unfold like living tapestries. Families rise early, days are marked by planting and harvest seasons, and meals are grounded in what comes from the earth. Generators buzz during load shedding, radios hum with local gospel stations, and gatherings might involve more neighbours than immediate relatives. Life here is measured less by deadlines and more by weather patterns, crop cycles, and livestock routines. Along the coast, small towns stretch lazily beside the waves. In the Western Cape, fishing villages like Paternoster and Arniston wake with the tide. The sea dictates everything. When the boats go out, what's served for supper, whether the children will swim or stay wrapped in blankets by the stove. In the Eastern Cape, coastal towns like Kenton-on-Sea and Coffee Bay exist in the gentle tug between tradition and tourism. The pace is slower, the ocean ever present, and daily life unfolds with the rhythm of sand and salt. Dusty inland roads snake through semi-deserts and shrublands where towns are few and far between. These places might look forgotten on a map, but they're rich with character. You'll find a corrugated iron church that still rings its bell each Sunday, a windmill creaking against the sky, and a family-run pad stall selling homemade pies, biltong and marmalade in recycled jars. The names of these places, Calitzdorp, Nieuwoutville, Loxton, roll off the tongue like a folk song you didn't know you knew. And while South Africa's big cities speak with an accent shaped by diversity and modernity, rural areas each hum with their own dialects, customs and colours. In KwaZulu-Natal, deep Zulu traditions blend with the scent of sugarcane and the beat of Maskandi music. In Mpumalanga, Shangaan and Swazi cultures add layers to the tapestry. The Xhosa heartland of the Eastern Cape is steeped in ritual, rhythm, and deep family roots. People here still gather for initiation ceremonies, funerals that stretch across days, and storytelling sessions under star-filled skies. Each region carries its own taste too. The Karoo, with its wide skies and endless horizons, offers hearty fare like lamb stew, rooster cook, and the kind of rusks that beg to be dunked into coffee during long, slow mornings. The Free State might serve up potjekos, bubbling in cast-iron pots over open flames, while the West Coast leans into seafood, crayfish, snook, mussels, cooked simply and savoured communally. Craft is equally regional. In the Cederberg Mountains of the Western Cape, artisans still produce intricate rooibos blends and preserve the age-old rock art of the San people. In the Eastern Cape, beadwork, wire art, and clay pottery continue as living traditions, not just souvenirs. Zulu basket weavers in KwaZulu-Natal turn river reeds into tightly coiled containers, beautiful and functional. In Limpopo, vendor sculptors shape wood into ancestral figures and ceremonial masks that carry deep spiritual meaning. Clothing, too, is a canvas of geography. In the rural north, bright Shweshwe prints are sewn into traditional dresses for weddings and celebrations. In Xhosa communities, black and white striped garments mark significant life events, from coming-of-age rituals to sacred ceremonies. In the dusty heart of the Karoo, you might spot a woolen hat with sun-faded patterns pulled down over weathered brows, while in coastal villages, colourful sarongs flap from laundry lines like miniature flags of identity. Even the way people speak shifts from town to town. South Africa's 11 official languages and countless dialects, creoles, and slang expressions mean that the same phrase can sound wildly different depending on where you are. In Johannesburg, a phrase might be delivered with fast-paced Tsotsitaal flair. In rural KwaZulu-Natal, the same sentence could be rich in isiZulu metaphors and poetic formality. Language is a bridge, but also a fingerprint, one that tells you not just who someone is, but where they're from and who they've listened to. And while many travellers head for the famous sites, some of South Africa's most magical places are tucked just off the tourist path, waiting with open arms and unpaved roads. Take the Cederberg, for instance. Just a few hours north of Cape Town, these rugged ochre-coloured mountains are home to towering rock formations, crystal-clear rivers, and ancient cave paintings. At sunset, the cliffs turn gold and crimson, and silence wraps around you like a second skin. Here, rooibos grows wild, leopards slip through shadows, and the stars are so bright you could almost hear them crackle. Then there's Hogsback, nestled high in the Amathole Mountains of the Eastern Cape. It's said to have inspired parts of Tolkien's Middle-earth, and whether that's true or not, it's easy to believe. Mist curls through forests of yellowwood and fern. Waterfalls cascade down mossy cliffs. Artists and wanderers alike find solace here, in cottages with crooked chimneys and tea rooms that smell of cinnamon and damp pine needles. It's a place for poems, long walks, and forgetting what day it is. The Karoo, stretching across the interior like an ancient sigh, offers a different kind of magic. Vast, empty, and echoing, it's a place of big skies and small towns. Fossils whisper from beneath rocky outcrops. Sheep dot the landscape like moving stones. In the heat of midday, the silence is almost holy. And at night, under that dome of stars, you begin to understand just how much space still exists for wonder. And on the wild coast, one of South Africa's most untouched and spectacular stretches of shoreline, cliffs drop into frothing waves, cows laze on beaches, and the wind carries the scent of salt and stories. This is where the land feels both ancient and alive. Villages balance on green hills, rivers spill into the sea, and every turn in the road reveals another breathtaking view. It's a place where the rules of time relax, and every visitor becomes a storyteller. Throughout all of this, one thing remains constant: the relationship between people and place. In South Africa, geography shapes not just scenery, but identity. Mountains become ancestors. Rivers carry names and memories. Homes are more than buildings. They are narratives, anchored by soil, season, and sound. Whether built from corrugated iron, stone, brick, or thatch, each one contains layers of history, hope, and heritage. To be South African is, in many ways, to be shaped by contrast. To know the click of a city card machine and the creak of a windmill in the same lifetime. To move between town and township, ocean and orchard, fast Wi-Fi and flickering candlelight. To have stories that begin with goats and end with hashtags. It's not always seamless. The contrasts can sometimes sting. Inequality remains a deep fault line, and access to land, services, and opportunity is uneven. But within those contrasts, there is also immense colour, strength, and creativity, because for all its edges and complexities, South Africa is still a place where neighbours greet each other by name, where landscapes leave you speechless, and where life, urban, rural, coastal, inland, unfolds in rich, textured layers. Like a quilt sewn from many fabrics, the pieces may be different, but stitched together, they hold something warm, strong, and unmistakably homegrown. In South Africa, the past doesn't just live in textbooks or memorial plaques. It walks with you. It echoes in the silence of former prison cells. It stirs in murals on city walls. And it pulses through songs, languages, and stories passed down around kitchen tables and firelight. This is a country where history is never far away, but also one where the future is being shaped with urgent, radiant energy. The tension between memory and momentum is everywhere, and somehow South Africa carries both, its pain and its promise, together in one breath. There are places where that breath catches in your throat. The Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg is one of them. From the moment you enter, assigned a ticket that identifies you arbitrarily as white or non-white, you are immersed in a carefully curated journey through decades of brutal, systemic division. Black and white footage flickers on the walls. Passports, protest posters, and police documents sit behind glass. The voices of resistance rise in protest songs, in courtroom testimony, in the steady gaze of those who dared to speak out. It's not a comfortable place. It's not meant to be. But it is essential. A space where the truth is not hidden but laid bare, where remembrance becomes a form of justice. Robben Island, off the coast of Cape Town, carries its own heavy silence. For years, this wind-swept patch of land served as a prison for political dissidents, most famously Nelson Mandela, who spent 18 of his 27 imprisoned years here. The tiny cell where he lived still stands, barely wide enough for a man to stretch his arms. Tours are led by former prisoners, their voices steady and clear. They don't sugarcoat. They recount isolation, hard labours, and the mental gymnastics required to survive. But they also speak of hope, of secret debates, of smuggled books, of friendships forged through shared struggle. The sea that surrounds the island isn't just water, it's a moat filled with memory. In Johannesburg, Constitution Hill is another powerful site of reflection. Once a notorious prison that held everyone from Gandhi to anti-apartheid activists, it's now home to South Africa's Constitutional Court, an institution built, quite literally, on the ruins of oppression. The bricks of the old prison were used in the court's construction, a symbolic act of transformation. The court's design invites transparency, glass walls, open spaces, public art. It declares, with architectural honesty, that justice should never again hide behind closed doors. Inside, the Bill of Rights is engraved into the walls in every official language. Justice is not just heard here. It's seen, spoken, and woven into the very structure. Yet remembering is not a simple act. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established in the mid-90s, was a groundbreaking and deeply complex attempt to reckon with the atrocities of apartheid. Led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the commission invited victims and perpetrators to share their stories. Some received amnesty, some received closure, others received neither. The process was painful, public, and profoundly imperfect, but it marked a turning point. It asked the country not to forget, but to face the truth head-on and begin slowly to heal. Still, reconciliation is not a finish line. It's a long road, one that twists through economic inequality, generational trauma, and the enduring legacies of spatial segregation. Townships remain underserved. Schools remain unequal. Land redistribution remains a simmering issue. But amid these challenges, the country continues to move, not always in a straight line, but always forward. Part of that forward motion comes through art. South Africa's creative revival is one of its most powerful engines of expression and change. Visual artists use paint and sculpture to reimagine identity. Poets take the stage at spoken word events and festivals, turning verse into protest and celebration. Dancers, filmmakers, and musicians blend past and present, bringing ancient rhythms into modern movements. Street murals in Soweto, Cape Town, and Durban transform alleyways into open-air galleries. They depict struggle heroes, township queens, children with stardust in their eyes. Some are raw with anger, others radiate joy. All of them insist on being seen. Public art here doesn't ask for permission. It claims space, loudly and beautifully. Language, too, is being reclaimed. For decades, African languages were marginalised in schools and official settings, dismissed as impractical or inferior. Today, there's a resurgence of pride in isiXhosa, isiZulu, Setswana, Sesotho, and other indigenous tongues. Books, podcasts, films, and even YouTube channels are being produced in multiple languages, not as a novelty, but as a necessity. Bilingual storytelling is thriving. Children are learning to code in their mother tongues. Language isn't just communication, it's culture, heritage, and power. And then there's the youth. South Africa's youngest generation is the first to be born entirely post-apartheid, sometimes called the born frees. But freedom, they will tell you, isn't just about voting or crossing old boundaries. It's about opportunity. And that opportunity remains uneven. Young people face staggering unemployment rates, limited access to quality education, and a political landscape that doesn't always speak their language. But they also bring bold ideas, digital savvy, and a refusal to accept the status quo. Youth-led movements are rising. Activists organise around gender-based violence, LGBT+ rights, climate justice, and mental health. Hashtags trend not just for fun, but for change. Protests are documented and shared in real time. Online, young South Africans are curating conversations that challenge and inspire. Offline, they are starting businesses, mentoring peers, and reshaping what leadership looks like. Innovation is emerging in unexpected places. In rural villages, solar microgrids are being set up by young engineers to bring light to off-grid communities. In townships, mobile health clinics use app-based triage to serve thousands. Cape Town is home to one of the continent's leading tech scenes. Johannesburg hosts design summits and startup incubators. Durban's beachfront is a testing ground for climate-resilient infrastructure. Across the country, sustainability isn't just a buzzword, it's a blueprint for survival. And survival is increasingly tied to climate. South Africa, with its rich biodiversity and stunning ecosystems, is on the front line of environmental change. Droughts have scorched farmland. Floods have devastated communities. Wildfires rage in summer, and rising sea levels threaten the coasts. Conservation efforts are underway, from rewilding projects in the Eastern Cape to plastic recycling initiatives in urban centres. But the path ahead requires not just environmental awareness, but systemic change. Young climate activists like Ayaka Melifafa are stepping into that space, demanding accountability and envisioning green economies that don't leave anyone behind. Indigenous knowledge systems, often overlooked, are being brought into the conversation, valued not just for their heritage, but for their practical, sustainable wisdom. In the end, the dream for South Africa is not just about prosperity, it's about dignity. about closing the gap between potential and reality, about ensuring that every child, whether born in a Cape Town suburb or a remote Limpopo village, has access to clean water, quality education, safe streets, and the freedom to be fully themselves. That dream is messy, it is ongoing, but it is alive in the millions of small decisions made every day. In classrooms, courtrooms, kitchens, and commuter taxis. It lives in the grandmother teaching her grandson to speak isiZulu, in the artist painting memories into murals, in the student protesting outside Parliament, in the coder building an app to connect small farmers with big markets, in the teacher who buys extra pencils for her students, in the parent who tucks a child in and whispers, "Tomorrow will be better." The echoes of the past are real. They ache, they instruct, they warn. But the dreams of the future ring just as loud, and together they form the song of South Africa, a harmony of sorrow and hope, memory and imagination, grounded in struggle and lifted by vision. It's a song still being written, verse by verse, voice by voice, and it is far from finished. South Africa is a country that doesn't fit neatly into boxes or tidy definitions. It doesn't whisper its story, it sings it, dances it, paints it on walls and sculpts it from stone. It speaks in 11 languages and countless accents, in songs of protest and praise, in the slow rhythm of rural life and the fast-forward pulse of city streets. It is a land of texture, both beautiful and bruised, ancient and immediate, joyful and grieving. And somehow, these contrasts don't cancel each other out, they hold hands. They make a whole. You've just wandered across a place where deserts bloom after the rain and forests hum with unseen life. You've stood at the edge of a Karoo horizon so wide it makes your thoughts go quiet, and felt the sea spray from a wild coast wave that's never broken the same way twice. You've walked from city towers to township murals, watched minibus taxis weave through traffic like heartbeat and breath, and heard the names of those who came before spoken like blessings. In South Africa, the land itself tells stories. Caves still hold the painted wisdom of the San people. Mountains carry the bones of warriors and shepherds, and rivers remember routes taken by elephants and exiles alike. The soil is thick with history, sometimes sweet, sometimes heavy, and every place you go is stitched with human footprints, ancient and new. But this isn't a country frozen in its past. It moves. It evolves. It questions. It reinvents. The past is not forgotten, but it's not the only thing spoken of. Children born after apartheid's fall are growing into poets, engineers, designers, and dreamers. They wear their heritage in their fashion and their playlists, in their language and in their laughter. They challenge, they build, and they reach for futures their parents only imagined. You've glimpsed the soul of the Rainbow Nation, not just in the celebratory stripes of a flag or the diversity of a crowd, but in the quiet gestures of everyday life. In the early morning auntie sweeping her stoop while humming a hymn, in the old man who greets the sunrise with rooibos tea and the slow turn of a newspaper page, in the cousins squeezed together in the back of a taxi, sharing headphones and chewing gum, in the long shadow of a jacaranda tree where someone somewhere is learning to write their name for the very first time. Yes, there are struggles, deep ones. Inequality gnaws at the seams. Unemployment weighs heavily. Infrastructure buckles. Climate change knocks louder each year. But in the face of this, there's also endurance, resilient, radiant, stubborn hope. The kind that grows like aloe in dry soil. The kind that makes people keep singing even when they're tired. The kind that doesn't just survive, but creates, leads, and insists on better. The harmonies here aren't perfect. They clash, they resolve, they echo. But that's what makes the music honest. It's not the polished kind. It's the lived-in kind. The kind that makes your chest tighten. The kind you hum without meaning to. It's the sound of a people still in motion. South Africa is more than a destination. It's a feeling, a conversation, a rhythm in your step and a warmth in your chest. It's the lingering taste of chakalaka, the call of a haidada in the morning, the thunder of a stadium crowd, and the hush of a veld at dusk. It's the hand-painted sign that says, "We fix anything," and somehow you believe it. The Rainbow Nation isn't just a name, it's a living mosaic. It's stitched together with wire and wool, words and wishes, sunlight and song. Each thread matters. Each voice counts. And when you listen closely, you don't just hear one story, you hear thousands, together, alive. So before you drift off to sleep, thank you for joining me on this journey. I hope it soothed your mind, sparked your curiosity, and painted a gentle trail through this extraordinary land. If you found something here that made you smile or stirred your thoughts, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave this video a like or subscribe to the channel to keep exploring more stories from around the world. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? What's the time there? Are you wrapped up in blankets, dozing in bed, or sipping tea by the window as the stars come out? Share your time zone and your corner of the world in the comments. It's always a joy to see where we're dreaming together from. Just remember, this video is for relaxation and learning, never medical advice. Sleep well, traveller, and may the echoes of South Africa's soul follow you into peaceful dreams.